Well, I started seeing this pop up in meme and reaction image format on Twitter or X or whatever the hell it's called now. And as of this writing, it's amassed nearly 175 million views on YouTube. So there's no doubting that this thing has resonated with the culture in the truest way possible. It has some strange power over the collective unconsciousness that we don't see too often. Since meme magic is my master, I reasoned that I was obliged to check it out. I had no knowledge of this project beforehand, so as far as I'm concerned, it's a dark horse success, but maybe I'm just horribly out of touch with the kids these days. Beep bop beep bop boop beep.
You're so skibbity.
Well, to begin with, I liked it. The humor lands well, and the webcore aesthetic, is that what it's called? Really reads like an elevated version of the 90s CGI aesthetic. Reminds me of well-executed analog horror or like pixel art. Like taking what was once done out of necessity due to technological limitations and expressing it as an apt aesthetical choice, you know? Also, I be delectating some good old existentialism. The idea that if the characters dwell on their plight too long, they degenerate into a feral black blob. Oh yeah, that's relatable. And really gives me some Smiling Friends vibes too. But where's the fun and tepid positivity? Let's levy some harsh criticism, which I have in such copious supply, at this beautiful and freely provided labor of love. Alright, while I did enjoy it, I do also find the plot to be yeomanly but inelegant. Those are some of the many words I learned in my How to Talk Like a Pretentious Douche class, which as you can see was money well spent. To put it less pretentiously, the script does a little too much clowning around. I think it could have stood a few more rewrites to stay on the ball. This isn't a Harlequin romance, baby. Harlequin, baby. Never mind. Everything kind of just happens too fast for me. Our protagonist, Pomni, just sort of literally pops into the story in medias res. Then we just sort of get like a rapid-fire exposition dump. Basically, the story structure suffers a bit from a lack of setup and payoff. I'm a structure guy. My issue with this is that Pomni doesn't really take any time to acclimate to her plight and has very little reaction to it other than trying to convince herself she's dreaming, which is a respectable cope and all, but it's kind of a telling, not showing kind of problem. You see what I mean? My big issue getting invested so far is the lack of motivation. We just don't get much of a chance to learn anything about Pomni beyond the fact that she'd be hitting fat dabs that copium on the reg. Sorry. In the first place, I don't get if the headset removal scene means she logged in on purpose or if she got pulled in against her volition or what. Basically, is this a Homer Cube situation or a dot hack sign situation? There are a lot of works of fiction that posit similar trapped in a virtual world premises as the Digital Circus, and among the ones that didn't give anyone seizures, there are some really good examples to compare it to in terms of how they might best try to marshal interesting conflict of this setting. Let's dive in. In Dot Hack, we have an amnesic protagonist trapped in a VR game world, but we do at least have the context that the virtual world is supposed to be a normal game and that the other characters are people who can log in and out as they please. Tsukasa wakes up with no memory of how they got there or why, and the cast become embroiled in the mystery of this player who can't log out. Now, I'm using Dot Hack Sign as an example of effectively setting up a narrative framework, certainly not as an example of masterful pacing. This show was stylish, but boy, it was basically establishing shot the series. You know, it was a masterwork in pacing though. Homer Cubed, this random 40-year-old Simpsons Halloween episode. In it, Homer chooses to fling himself into an unknown parallel plane of existence rather than endure a mildly awkward social encounter. So this is the most relatable premise in the history of fiction. In Homer, we have a consistent and plausible motive that continues to inform his decisions throughout the story, from his initial awestruck exploration of this new world to his eventual foolish impulses which bring about an incipient and escalating threat. Then eventually it all wraps up, as all masterful works of fiction do, with the timely appearance of an erotic patisserie.
Erotic cakes?
I believe the literary term for this is Deus Ex Erotica. Obviously, and possibly unfortunately, Digital Circus probably won't go this route. Simpsons was going for comedic effect, and in fact, it was a parody of a Twilight Zone episode. Oh, speaking of Twilight Zone, the Digital Circus reminds me a lot of the Twilight Zone episode 5 Characters in Search of an Exit. That also has a zany collection of singular characters inexplicably trapped in a mysterious environment. There's also a clown even, except his only job is to fuck around, which, you know, kind of makes more sense. I guess back in those days, they wouldn't have expected the clown to be relatable as a protagonist. Well, as far as Circus goes, if it does bear any further resemblance to this Twilight Zone episode, I hope it's in showcasing more of these characters' unique responses to their dire circumstance. Whatever the ending or the twist ends up being won't even necessarily be as important to the story as that. Well, that's about all the comparable trapped in a weird place media I can think of. Well, I guess there is Danganronpa, but let's not get into that. Mostly, though, I wonder what any catalyst for plot action could be, given our heroine seems to be so invincible, passive, non-committal. I'm at least interested enough to come back to see more, and that's something. I like the Stanley Parable-inspired liminal space, and I like the basic characterization of the supporting cast, even if I think the sympathy factor was evoked a little too quickly in this seminal outing. And boy, who could help but have a lasting affection for Kane's horrible little bubble guy? Anyway, the only brainstorming happening around here is a meteor shower. This is Galaxybrain Okas. Goodbye.